have a very special guest today. He is both an expert in public health, an expert in epidemiology, an expert in all things science and COVID and those sorts of things. And also, he has developed an expertise in free speech because all the big tech platforms were colluding with the Biden administration to silence him. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Really an honor to be here.
Yeah, I want to get into what YouTube and Twitter under Jack Dorsey and these other platforms were doing, how the Biden administration was coercing them to silence you. But before we do that, I want to jump sort of to the end, because after all of what happened to you and to the American public, we have governments all over the world now trying to legislatively do what they could not achieve through executive branch action. Canada is the latest, where the head of Canada, it's a parliamentary system, has introduced legislation that would criminalize speech. The sort of things that you say and do as an expert could be deemed misinformation by this Canadian government, and you could actually be imprisoned for it. What's going on around the globe to silence opposition to this new left-wing regime?
When the Cold War started, Churchill gave a famous speech where he said that there's an iron curtain dropping across Europe, separating free from unfree. I have to say what's happened now is essentially a silicon curtain that has dropped across all of the, I'd say, the previously free West. And what's happened is, in the name of policing misinformation, a task that is utterly impossible if you think about it, because there's no human being or set of human beings on earth that can inerringly distinguish true from false. The basic civil right of free speech has been essentially by design curtailed, where the excuse is that, well, because there is a very easy way to reach audiences with social media, that justifies this kind of this kind of like utopian, utopian is the wrong word, this sort of dystopian effort. And the effort is essentially exactly what you said. It's to put in systems, often using large scale AI, to coerce platforms, nominally private platforms, which are aimed at spreading, allowing people to speak to each other, and to police them, to label people as misinformers, to label ideas as off limits, and essentially to put the thumb of a set of people who really don't really know any better than anyone else in terms of what's true and false, in a way so that they can control exactly what's said online.
Yeah. So, but this silicon curtain, it's enforced by our own law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, our intelligence communities, including the CIA, but also their sister organizations all over the world. The United Kingdom, France, we've just witnessed the arrest, the incarceration of the head of Telegram in France. And we see what's going on in Brazil and in the United Kingdom, where in the UK, 3,000 people are arrested and imprisoned every year for their speech, the criminalization of speech that the incumbent government doesn't like. What do you see in the offing? Are we going to be able to push back and protect free speech rights, or are we witnessing the beginning of the end of Western-style democracy?
I really think it comes down to the United States, actually. I mean, all of what you said is exactly true, but a lot of the policies follow what Americans do. The biggest platforms for free speech and in social media for speech are American-owned platforms. And so the way that the United States treats free speech is essentially it's a bulwark against exactly what you just described, because it's very difficult for a country to impose restrictions on speech. Like it's difficult for the EU to do it if the United States doesn't cooperate. Or if the United States says, look, it's one of our national priorities that we allow our citizens to speak to each other and to speak to other people outside the United States, and we're not going to allow other countries to impose the restrictions on free speech that could impinge on the free speech rights of Americans. I mean, imagine if we had an American president that actually spoke in that way. It would be very difficult for all these countries to act in the way that they have. I mean, and the UK it's such a shame, right? It's I've heard counter arguments to say, for instance, in Germany, they have long had laws that restricted people from promoting Nazi propaganda, for instance, right? I mean, that you can kind of understand some cultural differences, but those cultural differences in those other countries should have in no way impinge on how American leaders should act. I think that's to me that's the big hope. If we can win in the United States on free speech, then we will win basically everywhere else.
Yeah, and of course here at the Media Research Center, we fight against this censorship all the time. We have Censor Track. Of course, you have been censored numerous times by YouTube and Twitter and Google and others. For example, you were censored simply because you were advocating for policies that would protect the elderly and the vulnerable from COVID, and that children would not be harmed by lockdowns that did not make sense scientifically. What happened to you when you did those things?
I mean, so when I wrote this thing called the Great Barrington Declaration in October 2020 with Sunetra Gupta of Oxford University and Martin Kulldorff of Harvard, and then tens of thousands of doctors signed on, and epidemiologists and scientists signed on. Almost 1 million people signed the petition that we put together, and it's exactly what you just described: lift lockdowns, don't harm children by closing their schools, but protect older people much better. 4 days after we wrote the declaration, the head of the National Institute of Health, a man named Francis Collins, wrote an email to Tony Fauci calling for a devastating takedown of the premise of the declaration. And what happened next was Google suppressed the search results for the Great Barrington Declaration. So it was like, page 7. There were Wikipedia hit pieces that were put up on the top of it. The Facebook page for the declaration was taken down. If you shared the declaration on Twitter, you would get you'd get deboosted or maybe even kicked off the platform. There were hit pieces written by all the usual suspects: Washington Post, New York Times, Wired magazine. In fact, it was funny thing was that Tony Fauci responded to that call for a devastating takedown with a piece that he almost obviously planted in Wired magazine, essentially lying about the nature of the proposal. We were arguing for focused protection of vulnerable older people. He characterizing it as a let it rip strategy. So it was pretty terrible. It was like the entire sort of censorship industrial complex machine was aimed at defaming me and anyone who agreed with me on, for instance, keeping schools open. Yeah,
now, Doctor, it's my point of view that it's not the public health field at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, whether it's NIH or CDC or FDA or the others, that led this charge. It was our own intelligence community and law enforcement agencies, politicized, using COVID, using this debate among scientists about what the right policies are to sway the election, and to silence this. I'll refer to it as a conservative movement. Some people will refer to it as a populist movement, but where the individual is respected as a unique person. And then under our own Constitution, it's we the people who are to govern ourselves. Each one of us is deserving of equal dignity and respect. I don't think the elites in government, not only in the US, but all over the world, they don't like this idea that a guy in Topeka, Kansas has the same voting ability as some elite banker in New York City or a PhD at Stanford University. That a barber or a bread maker can participate in self-government. The elites don't like that. What are we going to do to save our democracy from this left-wing attack against it?
So I don't think that it's purely political. I do think that there was opportunistic behavior by political actors in the United States, and I think certainly the Democrats in the United States exploited the evident failure to protect vulnerable people that happened in the COVID pandemic, which actually, by the way, happened basically everywhere in 2020. So so that's kind of understandable. You raised another point, which I think is absolutely true. I absolutely agree with. I don't think this was a public health response in per se. Right? A public health response to a respiratory viral pandemic like that we saw would have been more like the 2009 swine flu response, or the for a century of respiratory virus pandemics, 1957, 1968, 1976, 2003, 2009. You have a very, very focused response. You identify the vulnerable people, and then you deploy resources to protect them, but you don't disrupt the rest of society. The kind of response we saw seemed more to me like a response to what you think a bioterror event would look like. Right? These were not standard plans to manage a respiratory virus pandemic. They were a vast, if they were that, it was a vast overreaction in the sense of like harming people that were much less vulnerable, that even in places that had very little spread to begin with. And I do think the intelligence agencies played a big role in information management. They absolutely did. You see there's a lawsuit I was involved with, this Missouri versus Biden case, where one of the entities that was implicated in the censorship activities included the CIA and the FBI, so especially the FBI. And so the question is why? Why are these agencies involved in what nominally ought to be a public health response? And I don't really have a good answer to that question.
You've said something really interesting, that the response looked like a governmental response to a bioterrorist attack. And the Wuhan virus, had the first evidence of it was right near the Wuhan lab where they do COVID testing, but to suggest that the virus came from the Wuhan lab subjected people to censorship. But I'm suddenly thinking, I guess the FBI and our intelligence community knew all along that it was a biohazard from a lab in China that specialized in biohazards.
I mean, there was no question that the censorship machine was aimed at suppressing people from saying that that it might have been a lab leak, right? Based on intentional research done in China. By the way, funded in part by the American taxpayer. If you said online that it's possible that this was a lab leak, that the genetic code of the virus itself suggested there was some engineering involved, you would be suppressed. You'd be labeled a misinformer. The whole censorship regime would be sort of focused on you. I mean, that's interesting. Why was that done? And that was in 2020, right? So these agencies, they act independently in a way of even the leaders of the United States itself. And so it really looks like a kind of a structured way to control the narrative in a way that I mean, I think it ended up being quite damaging to science and the scientific enterprise, and also to public health.
We've here at the Media Research Center, we are fighting against this censorship, and we're working with Congress to defund it through the appropriations process. We've identified about 16 separate censorship initiatives being run by the Biden administration. We think we're going to be successful, but time is not on our side. This Biden administration is just so focused on trying to silence political opposition. As our time is drawing short here, Doctor, what are the prospects for free speech, both in America and overseas?
I think in the United States they're actually quite good. I think that it doesn't, in the United States anyways, the exposure of this whole censorship complex, and you guys' work has been fantastic on this, it basically will lead to the death of it. It's so fundamentally un-American to censor speech. There are still like quite a powerful group of people that are working on this within the government. And the way that they work is so insidious. They essentially launder their censorship activities by funding NGOs and universities in the name of research to do censorship, to support the censorship activities that and the pressure put on social media companies to censor. That needs to be undone. There's loopholes. For instance, the Supreme Court recently ruled in a case I was involved with that people like me who were censored don't have standing to sue unless we could show an email from a government official to a social media company saying censor Jay. But it's okay for but what we showed was that the government officials were telling social media companies censor the kinds of ideas Jay says. School closures are harmful. That's a major loophole that needs to get closed. And the Supreme Court isn't going to do it. I mean, we need legislation, I think, to fix that. So I think that there's work to do, but the forces of censorship in the United States are on the back heel, and we need to keep pushing really hard on it. Around the world, it's going to be harder, but I do think that, as I said at the beginning, American leadership on this, a president that squarely says this is a priority for the United States to have free speech, would make it much more difficult for Western countries to maintain these laws that are so fundamentally at odds with American values.
Well, Doctor, you are a great advocate for free speech, and as a consequence, a great advocate for freedom and Western-style representational democracy that has helped more people on the planet than anything else. And you are a great scientist, a great public health expert who's keeping us all healthy and safe. Thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate all the work you are doing. Please continue on.
Thank you for the kind words. An honor to be talking with you.